Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Satsang. Let's make some silence first. Letting go. All sums up to letting go. It is an attitude. Attachments are those things you consider your own, that you embrace and take to yourself. It is a relationship you create with the world through that body-mind complex and the world. Detachment is to reject that relationship, stop that relationship with the world. It is an inner attitude, untouched. So let's talk about suffering a little bit. There are many paths that take to the quest for freedom. Many ways, but usually we can resume this to two different ones. Either through suffering, intense suffering, or through understanding, through wisdom. The majority goes through suffering. In these times, wisdom is not something, it's not a very available commodity. People tend to question why they suffer. And usually, most of these questionings, they are about just releasing a little bit of the pressure and going back to the same. Only few, those who are seekers of truth, only those can actually question. Because, as I've explained previously, your dreams and your suffering, your fears, your nightmares, your own hell, they are part of a balance that you call your world. It is more or less moving into this known territory. Without your fears, without your suffering, there wouldn't be much of a point to dream, to aspire to that supreme happiness or to big goals or whatever, to whatever your dreams are. And without your dreams, well, suffering wouldn't be suffering also, because if you would experience the bad parts of life, what you call your bad experiences, if they would be continuous, they would become common and normal, and it wouldn't bring too much of discomfort. You tend to normalize everything. So it needs to have these two extremes so that it can be can bring challenges. It can bring the life, the juice out of life, what is called normal life. So it is a big part. And behind all the creativity, all the innovations that the human being is capable of, lies a really mechanical life, mechanical experience. You say your life moves in certain ways, more or less the same. Circumstances change, but the fundamental experience that you get is practically the same. And it moves on levels, but let's forget this for now. So eventually, you're looking into the horizon to those goals that you want to achieve, without realizing that you're really just walking in circles, looking to like an elliptic circle, looking at to one extreme of the elliptic, being more or less in the middle, and coming closer to that extreme, and then going back to the other. From happiness or from more closer to your dreams, and then going back to your suffering, to your pain, and to the bottom of the well, as they say. And then you get out again from that and go back again. As hope comes back again, then your dreams become possible, everything is shining again, then it becomes dark, and then it shines again, it becomes dark, and shines again, it becomes dark. This is human life. Because it brings you movement, but you're actually not moving anywhere. So when you start understanding the basis of all of this, you will see that where you're trying to get is not in that direction, is more of upward movement. It is like, I don't like that word, but I'll use it, ascending, but not in that context, but ascending uh, from this circle, like you're walking like this, and it is moving in a different direction, getting out from those polarities. So when you get to the suffering part of your experience, which is very important, even more important than your dreams, more precious, when you get to that part, then you start to question a lot of things, and even spirituality becomes a possibility, or even freedom becomes a possibility. But the majority of times is just to get out from that suffering. But if you look at the suffering that you are experiencing now, if you look at it, you will see all the steps you have given into that direction. How you made sure that you would be in that situation specifically. And when you stop putting responsibility onto the world and being a victim of circumstances, you will be able to see clearly the design, your own design, the design of your world, at least of part of it, because your aspirations, more or less, you know. But this other part, which is a crucial part of the balance of your life, this you don't tend to know, you don't tend to have this vision. But that suffering is exactly what you want. It is a part of your world, and it's exactly the way you want it to be, at least until now. Because losing a part of that world, you imagine if you would lose your dreams, that would be serious, that would be bad. But losing your suffering, it's actually even worse. So there's no going out without understanding the mechanics of your own illusion. And when you realize that whatever you are experiencing, those intense moments that are only possible because of hope and despair, you will have a clear vision of what you need, what is a part of your world, and what you're really working towards. Because if you're in suffering now, you have been working to get to that point. You have made certain decisions that brought you there. And if your vision is capable, you can see that it is not a new thing. And depending on your age, you have probably lived this again and 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 again. Yes, circumstances change, but the actual experience that you have in your intimate space is the same. So, not sure if I should go that deep because it probably will create confusion. But at one of the deepest level, not the deepest, but almost there, it is the relationship you have with yourself. So it's quite common that people have low self-esteem. What does this mean? They reject themselves. And it is said that you need to love yourself and all of that, and la 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 until you fall asleep. But there is actually a rejection towards yourself. And that is quite understandable. There is this path of trying to correct that, of loving yourself. This is what is said. But that's not yourself. That is the body-mind complex. And what brings this rejection is a deeper knowing that I'm not the body-mind complex. I'm unlimited. I'm not this. This is weak, feeble, limited, clumsy. And this doesn't define you at all. So there is a natural rejection that is interpreted through the personality and through circumstances and through all the equivocals. Not sure if this word exists in English, okay, but through all misconceptions. But bottom line is, you are not that. So how can you accept that to be yourself? Oh, so there is clarity in this rejection. And this creates animosity towards the body-mind complex, towards what you call yourself. And this rejection, this need to reject, this needs to be lived again and again, because this is really about freedom, nothing else. And if you don't understand what freedom is, you will live it through your understandings of freedom. And your understandings of freedom is improvement, for example. Because improving that is a way of being free from that condition. So if you don't know what real freedom is, then improvement, or if there's frustration and inability to improve, then the impulse is destroy, because if you cannot improve it, then you will destroy it. So eventually, hope and despair also translates into improvement or destruction. So that cycle is also about this freedom from what you appear to be, either trying to improve it, circumstantial happiness, or trying to destroy it. But this rejection is natural, because what you appear to be doesn't resonate at all with what you know that you are, what is more natural, not know from here. This knows nothing. So that rejection is natural. So more or less, this animosity is one of the ends of this cycle. And eventually, depending on the level of this love-hate relationship, that will determine also the intensity of the cycles that you are living. So the more the relationship is hateful towards the body-mind complex, also these despair cycles have to be more intense also. Situations more extreme. For some this is bad, for others this is great, because, well, extremes offer also big opportunities. So no drama there. But eventually, your life resumes itself to trying to improve that, and with that circumstances, or trying to destroy it, or to feel that extreme rejection. That's what you feel when you're in despair, that you have failed, that you are not good enough, that you don't belong. The list is enormous, but it sums up to this. And this, to that character, to your world, to the balance of your world, is confirmation. Another way of seeing this cycle is this hate you have towards the body-mind complex, what you call yourself, then going to the world trying to prove that these ideas are wrong. But what you're really doing is trying to prove your level best that these ideas are right. And this is where it closes the cycle once you come back again to this point of this animosity towards yourself. Not all can have this clear vision of this cycle, but some can, but it is there. So as you get to this cycle, some have the maturity, or it's a little bit, to question these investments that are being made, this walking towards this hope that just feeds the same experiences, the same cycles. And when they understand a little bit, things tend to change in the way that you put yourself into life. And this can have many, many meanings, but it's not the point here today. The point here today is you're seeing life as it is. As it is. You're already having the vision of the life of that character. Nothing new will come out of it. It appears to be new, circumstances change. And this roller coaster, it has to be a roller coaster or else it just becomes normal. But that's it. And the quest for freedom, for those who can see it from that point, at least from that point, can see it in a more serious way, they have to understand that for them to have a chance, a real chance of getting out from that cycle, they will have to struggle against themselves. Struggle intensely because that character wants that experience, wants to continue his cycle. See, like the planets revolving around the sun, gravity pulls them, keeps them there. So do scientists say. Not sure, but that's what they say. So it's kind of the same for the character. It's like gravity. Gravity keeps them there. It is the basis of their world. And this has a huge meaning. And to be able to transcend these cycles, you are the biggest obstacle, if not the only obstacle to that. Because the part which is identified with the body-mind complex, that's what it wants. His precious dreams and his precious sufferings. Because both tend to pass. So, whatever good you're living now, it will pass. Because circumstantial happiness doesn't last. And whatever suffering you're experiencing, it will pass also, at that level at least. And when it passes, you tend to forget that which is clear when suffering is there, tends to be forgotten when hope dawns again. And usually when hope dawns, the same kind of hope, you tend to forget. And then you will have to go through more suffering, but that's not the most important part. You will have to wait again until your dreams become frustrations, and frustration takes you back to suffering. And sometimes this is fast, sometimes it is slow, but time is wasted. So what is clear in the bottom of the well, of the pit, becomes foggy or gets forgotten when hope dawns. But understand, you're getting to the same point because you're not understanding the message. And eventually, everything sums up to this relationship, to this body-mind complex. When you understand this, you forget about circumstances, you put them aside, unimportant, and you focus on this relationship. And eventually, to this separation of I and this. Eventually. And the biggest obstacles will be the character's need, because it survives on this movement. It is its own purpose. It is this. So you will do almost anything to go back to the same cycles, whatever they are. So this will be the biggest challenge. And you will not know because, well, you're creative. So you can see now at this moment the strategies you have used again and again to go back to the same point, the same decisions. But as you start observing them, you can become very creative. So you have to be suspicious of these things and not believing what is coming into the mind. And understanding that those things that come by impulse or by decision through certain levels of reasonings, 99.9%, it is about taking you to the same cycle. So eventually, the parts that you can move out already, that will be good. The parts that you cannot move out already, well, at least you can observe them and learn. Because no matter how creative you are, it is about the same basic principles. Same basic principles, going back to the same suffering. Some need to live it a few times, others many times, many lifetimes. That depends, but it is until you get the picture. So if you're in that suffering, intense suffering, don't try to get out from it already. You're always running and not observing. It is difficult, it is painful, yes, but it is important to stay there, to observe, how did I get here? And it was my decision, it wasn't someone else's. If someone else was deciding for me, that means I let them, I gave them that power, in some form. And if you want to see things this way, you will. If you want to justify and give responsibility to others, you will also. But in the middle of that suffering, seeing exactly what happened, it brings a lot of clarity. Those who are in the quest for freedom, or those who are willing, who are wanting, because willing is not a good word. If you're willing, it's not enough yet, because, well, like they say, oh, I'm open. What does it mean you're open? People are so used to going into shopping malls, and things are there for them to buy, and they choose what to buy. Oh, I'm open to see this presentation and maybe, who knows, getting something from here. Freedom is not something that you're open. Either you're desiring intensely, or it's nothing. Being open to it, it is still, you're still coming from a very high level of importance, and that's not enough. Not even close. So when you're in that level of suffering, don't be in a hurry to terminate that suffering. Learn to be in it. You're always being thrown from one side to the other because of these extremes. Learn to be in that position and observe. Those were your promises of happiness, and there you are again, in suffering. So that means those things that didn't have what they promise, what you want them to have. And if you're thinking about freedom, that means you must have read something, studied something, there must be something there. You already must have some information of what it is. And if by any chance you have the potential to become a seeker of truth, then your focus must change completely. And making the best use of that moment is crucial to lay the foundations of a completely different way to use your time. Also, learning to be in discomfort brings a lot of stability because it gets normalized, and this can always change. And once you get more stable, more accustomed even to that discomfort, then it will be more difficult to get you agitated, impressed. So if you're in that suffering, don't run away from it. Learn to be with it and use that time to change the direction, the way that you're using your time. If you're already a seeker of truth, or at least if you think you are, because, well, then you must understand that there's a lot of things to correct. Suffering just gives you a very good feedback. Not that if you're on the path you will not suffer. It's different. But there's the good suffering and the bad suffering. So the good suffering is usually shorter, but much more intense, much more difficult to deal with. And it is about experiencing and releasing your stock of suffering. What is called normal suffering, what people usually experience, worldly people, it is a suffering that it is feeding your stock of suffering. So, one, you are feeding your stock of suffering, making it bigger, and guaranteeing future suffering with it. As the stock is there, it guarantees future suffering. The suffering which is releasing, it is much more intense, but shorter in experience, and it comes, it goes. The velocity depends on your intensity. It is the suffering that it is removing your stock. It is getting burned. In experience, it appears to be the same, but it is completely different. Because the one that it is feeding that stock of suffering, then it will have to stop feeding that, and then it will have to burn all the stock existing. And the other, which is burning the stock existing, it's just burning it, and when it finishes, no more. but the experience is more or less the same. Only intensity differs. So a worldly person is on this cycle of feeding his own stock of misery, taking the lights out from those dreams and those flashy futures and all of that. This is what's left, a mechanical cycle of feeding own suffering. It's not very glamorous, but it's what it is. Okay. If there's any questions about this, well, you know the drill. I will answer your question now. Dear Narayan, I have no material ambitions. This is a big sentence. However, I am realizing there are very rooted psychological ambitions, deep suffering trying to be compensated in different ways. Just getting back to the cycle, what I was explaining previously. You told me some weeks ago that sometimes we can be meditating at the same time messing around. Usually I say this, it's like an indirect saying of what I cannot usually say directly. That's why we can feel go forward and back again. This is, in other words, that cycle I was referring. The 2 steps forward, 2 steps backward is the same cycle of going towards hope and back to despair. Same cycle. It's just in a spiritual context. That's the difference. Can this be one of my ways of messing around? Could you say something about it, please? Look, no material ambitions. What does this mean? You don't want money? That's not what is deemed of material ambitions. Material ambitions, it's everything which is connected to this plane of existence, whatever that means. So the need to attention, to be accepted, the need to suffer, all of these are material ambitions. Usually when people refer to that term, it's just conditioned to safety, to security, or prosperity, financially speaking. But that's just one aspect. There are many, many aspects. So these psychological needs, they are material ambitions. All which is connected to body-mind are material ambitions. So having no material ambitions, that is big sentence. So some people are more connected to financial securities or prosperities because, well, the world is more centered into those values now. So this is more visible because it is available for everyone, what is called the American dream. But that doesn't mean that that's the only material ambition. Everything else is material, what is connected towards matter. Matter at different stages, it doesn't matter. Matter doesn't matter. So independently of that, it doesn't change anything. It doesn't make you, if you don't have that thirst for money, it doesn't make you more evolved than someone else who has. Your fears are somewhere else, just that. And your challenge is somewhere else. It is, because I'm taking your word for it as it is here, because that is not even usually the case. I have seen again and again that those who say that they don't really have this need for attraction for money and all of this, they are the more attached than anyone else. I have seen this again and again. So it is complicated, but just Um, this being still and observing, like I said previously, is very important, because you will have a vision of how you've gotten that place. And then instead of assuming things that you would like them to be, you will have a clear vision of what they are. But that is difficult, because if that love and hate relationship is still there at its best, whatever that means, then you cannot have a clear vision, because judgment will be unbearable. And judgment is really just a waste of time and a waste of time. In psychological levels, at least. Yes, this is what you're seeing. It doesn't mean that there's nothing else there, but it's not the point now. So this moving 2 steps forward, 2 steps backward, it is a balance. It is a balance. So if the person is taken from that worldly life, at least circumstantial worldly life, and starts having a life which is more suitable to a seeker of truth, at least in the form, and keeps this 2 steps forwards, 2 steps backs. What is this? It's a balance. So there's a balance which is being maintained, and you're doing exactly what you were doing previously in your worldly life. You're maintaining a balance. You're maintaining your world. If you can keep your practices longer without sabotaging them, then your vibration would change. A part of your world would collapse for sure. And there are deep fears connected to this. Resistance at many levels. And this is why this 2 forward, 2 backwards. Hope, despair, hope again, despair. Practice, spiritual practice tends to move like this also. Unless you understand and it becomes serious. But it tends to move like this to keep the balance. Okay, so I go forward 2 steps, but not too much, because I need to go back to keep the balance. And this is the majority of spiritual practices. They don't intensify, because intensifying would mean a lot of steps in front. Then I would have to bring a lot of steps to the back again. So there's a balance which is maintained. And there are different levels of balance and different ways of establishing that balance, so that the main structures are not interrupted. At the surface, a lot of creativity. But then if we look closer, it's more or less the same. Also the same. So it is about without understanding your own cycles, the decisions that lead you to the same places, it is difficult or practically impossible to transcend that, because you don't have anywhere else to go. Nowhere to go. But this is what's behind this. The maintenance of the same balance, where this character can still have his experiences and persist, continue, have a future, and lots of futures ahead. If you have more doubts about this, well, you can send. Moving on. My friend, I will answer your question now. Hello Shima, I saw your video about meditation techniques for beginners and started the practice of Om Mantra. After about a week of practice, I started to feel a strong lethargy when I seek to do it again. I think that's related with the tamasic energy that you mentioned. How can I liberate that energy? Yes, and another way of putting it is the balance. So you have stretched the rope out of your world, meditating, pulling this vibration. Now all tamasic energy is coming to stop that and bring you back to the other extreme again. It is like this. So tamasic energy, there's a science, not very sophisticated one, but practical. So tamasic energy can be worked on with rajasic energy, with work, action, and then rajasic energy through meditation. You cannot jump it, because if you try to jump it, you'll just fall asleep. It's not really meditating. So, and usually work, it's not work as a rajasic work. What does a rajasic work means? A work that is about that benefits you in some way. This is where seva comes. Service. That which it doesn't matter where it goes, who it goes to. It's not coming to you. That is the most important aspect. And it is the most difficult to maintain. Because even seva, you're doing something that apparently it's not for you, but you're taking credit, you're putting hopes there, so you're messing up your seva. It takes time to purify all aspects, to make it proper. But you have to start somewhere. Usually work, doing some heavy work, something intense, followed by meditation, and in that work making practices, the mantra, praying, reverence presence, something that keeps your folk not energizing too much of this lower centers of energy which are connected to the character. So not bringing too much of this, and with your eyes in the infinite, and working hard, working intensely. This is the way to accelerate breaking that lethargy that there's a, not finding the word in English. Okay, lethargy, let's stay with that one. This is actually very good to test. The motivations behind the practices. Because everybody wants to just sit and meditate, yes, but when they are sent to work, heavy work, ooh, that's not for everybody. Then, well, that's not my idea of spirituality and meditation, all of that. Because it is still a tamasic vision, and it cannot go far. So these energies, tamasic and rajasic, they are in the same cycle that I've spoken about, hope and despair. So rajasic is the hope of better circumstances, working towards circumstances, realizing, investing, and all of that. And tamasic, it is suffering, pain, disease. And usually, human experience is centered on these extremes, tamasic and rajasic. Transcendence is sattva, which is beyond both. It's not on any of these extremes, but there's a line. You cannot go directly from tamasic energy to sattvic. It is impossible. So this is where work comes into play. And if meditation is the work, well, then you will have to do it intensely also. But it will be difficult because of the sleep and a lot of things. So one way to enhance this is through seva, through hard work, or both at the same time. Because it is a part of your world, that tamasic aspect, so as the rajasic one. So it is the same cycle, or ever always the same cycle, mechanical, repetition, 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 nothing new under the sun. Okay, so that's it for today. Next satsang will be Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. Brazilian time, UTC -3. Until then, well, make the best use of your time. Okay, watch.